$45,000, which is the first installment of our sponsorship of the Rotary Circle as per our agreement. Thank you. And there you go. Ta-da.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to pause for one quick second. We're having an issue on YouTube where there are no vocals, so they can't hear any of the presentations at this moment. So if we can just take a quick pause and hopefully get that working so people from home can hear about this wonderful presentation. So just be a moment. Perfect. They can hear us now, they're telling us. So for a quick little recap for our friends who are joining us through YouTube, I will kind of read what I had, and I'm sure they'll understand what the presentation is. So tonight we'd like to honor the Rotary Club of LaSalle Centennial on their 20th anniversary. It's an amazing milestone, and we thank you for your continued commitment to the LaSalle community and to Rotary International's mandate. We also want to congratulate Rotary International on their 120th anniversary. The opening of the Rotary Circle at LaSalle Landing this spring will be a lasting tribute to celebrate the 20th year of the Rotary Club LaSalle Centennial, and we appreciate the numerous hours that your members dedicate to projects in and outside of the town of LaSalle. You truly make a difference, and we really want to thank you for it. And on behalf of Council and Administration, we present a certificate of recognition to the members of the Rotary Club. So I'll have you come forward and we'll swap.
Oh wait, let's just fix that.
I'm the photographer. Okay, hold on. Okay, thank you. Mary Lou, she understands.
Try this one. Uh-oh, it's zoomed in. Oh no. Okay, here we go. Oh, that's too much. Photographer, I am not. Okay, I hope that's it.
One more,
That's
don't
good. That's your phone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to the agenda item H1. And that is the Howard Bouffard Secondary Plan adoption. And I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Planning and Development, Ms. Beggs. And joining Ms. Beggs will be Ron Palmer, as well as Grant Kaufman from LGL Limited, as well as from the Planning Partnership.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. We are here this evening to present and discuss the updated Howard Bouffard Secondary Plan. We have done a considerable amount of work on the plan since our statutory meeting back in October, and we're really excited to be able to present it to council tonight. It will be a very important document for the municipality as we move through the development approval process in Howard Bouffard. And it will help us to considerably facilitate development in that area as we plan for growth. So with that, the mayor already introduced Mr. Ron Palmer to my left and Mr. Grant Kaufman to my right, and they will be joining me in facilitating the presentation tonight. So as I said, we are here to present and discuss official plan amendment number 2, which includes a series of minor OPAs as well as integrates the actual Howard Bouffard secondary plan and associated appendices into our official plan. The appendices include Appendix 1, which is the design guidelines. The design guidelines are intended to support the principles of growth and development articulated in the town's OP and the secondary plan to help guide private development and the development of the public realm through to implementation. Appendix 2 is the Stormwater Management Plan, which essentially is the outcome of the Howard Bouffard Master Drainage Study. We are taking the preferred solution and integrating it into the secondary plan document. And then the third appendices is the terms of reference for technical studies, and what that does is provides a comprehensive list of the different studies that are perhaps necessary to support development applications, and some advanced scoping on those individual studies. So we are looking for council tonight to receive the report and adopt a bylaw to approve official plan amendment number 2. Following council consideration on that, provided there is a favorable decision, that will be forwarded to the County of Essex for their final approval. Next slide. So we thought it would be a good time to highlight the robust public consultation that we had undertaken as part of the secondary plan exercise. We did some consultation with First Nations to include Chippewa of the Thames First Nation and Caldwell First Nation. We met with them a series of times to share ideas and provide project updates along the way. We also collaborated extensively with the County of Essex. We meet with the county every 3 weeks, and this has been a topic of our discussions at that meeting for over a year and a half. And more in particular, we've spoken with the county as it relates to the development of the natural heritage policies. And so they have been front and center of the development of those policies and help to inform those policies in the plan that you see this evening. We held over 30 meetings with private landowners where we talked through their different development aspirations and expectations for development of their lands, and articulated the secondary plan process to them at that time. Their development aspirations were reflected in different options that were presented, as well as factored into the emerging preferred plan. We also hosted an online discussion forum through the town's civic engagement platform, where we received a total of 72 comments, over 2,000 views, and 118 connections were made for our residents to be able to actively follow the project. Next slide. In December, we appeared before council once again with the emerging preferred plan to seek endorsement to continue on in the secondary plan process. In January of 2024, we held 2 separate open house workshops where we invited residents and interested stakeholders to come in and share their ideas for growth and development in Howard Bouffard. And then, of course, in October, we held our statutory public meeting that I believe we had roughly 77 people attend the meeting. We received a comprehensive list of comments, feedback, ideas, and we have reflected on all those comments, feedback, and ideas, and provided responses to each individual comment that we received. Next slide. So I also just wanted to take a minute to talk a little bit more about the supporting documents. I think it's important to mention that there are a number of different background documents that were used to inform the development of the secondary plan. The first being the Natural Heritage Assessment that was completed by LGL. That work was really formed the backbone of the development and delineation of the actual natural heritage system that's reflected in the secondary plan. The Town of LaSalle Master Transportation Plan prepared by WSP, as well as a technical update report prepared by Lee Consulting to substantiate the proposed transportation network reinforced by WSP. We wanted to make sure that the transportation network was adequate to be able to support the anticipated growth that we're going to see in this area. We also leaned on the outcome of the Howard Bouffard Master Drainage Environmental Assessment that was prepared by Dillon Consulting, and we are taking that preferred solution and integrating that ultimate solution into the actual secondary plan document itself. So hopefully that provides sort of the how we got here, and I will pass it over to Mr. Palmer to talk a little bit more about the secondary plan.
Thank you for that introduction, and it's always great to be here in LaSalle. Very nice drive down today, no snow. Lovely. Before I get started, I always want to remind everyone that we did not start from scratch here. You have a new official plan, you have a new zoning bylaw, and you have had in the past planning work done in Howard Bouffard. And in fact, it has been identified for urban development in some form for over 20 years. So it's an important part of the work that this is fundamentally an update to that secondary plan work. We rely heavily on the new official plan for the policy framework. And of course, when we get to zoning, we'll be relying upon the zones that are in your new zoning bylaw. So everything should fit together quite well, utilizing your up-to-date new planning frameworks. The document itself that we're talking about tonight includes both an official plan amendment that talks about a number of changes to policy. Some are reflective of opportunities provided by the Planning Act that were not necessarily available when the official plan was written. Some are also updating some of your implementation tools to reflect more recent changes to the Planning Act that have occurred since your official plan was prepared. So I'm going to talk about the amendment first, and then I'll talk about a little bit about the detail that is within the secondary plan itself. The secondary plan is in fact part of the official plan amendment and will be embedded in your official plan. There will be no difference between what we call a secondary plan and the basic official plan document. It will be a chapter in the official plan. As I said, the document itself relies upon the policy framework from your new official plan. And while we talk about the land acknowledgement and we go through a bit of an introductory part of the explaining how the documents are supposed to work together and why it's important to do comprehensive planning for an area like Howard Bouffard that is so large and has so many elements within it. That's what comprehensive planning does for you, and it's fundamentally important as the opposite of incremental decision making. This is the beginning of a process for the development of Howard Bouffard. It is not the end of the process. There is still much work to do, applications to receive and review, and eventually approve. The plan itself is based on the 6 fundamental principles that are identified in your official plan. They're not part of the secondary plan. We're just telling you that this is what they are, and they're from your official plan, unchanged. We talk a little bit about the purpose of the secondary plan, and that's really about promoting comprehensive planning in Howard-Bouffard. I've said all along through this process that this is a very unique secondary plan. I've written about 60 secondary plans in my life, and none have been the same as this one, considering the significant issues we have with water and wastewater capacity, as well as stormwater management hurdles that are very important, and why we rely upon the background studies that have already been prepared on behalf of the town for Howard-Bouffard. This is a new framework. You'll note that the secondary plan is about 25 or 30 pages long, and again, that's because it becomes a chapter in the official plan, and it refers back to the policy frameworks that are already in the official plan. We are not reinventing the official plan, we are building on it. Next slide, please. The official plan amendment component has 5 items. The first one talks about how to utilize site plan control. This is one of the ones that was added to reflect the changes in legislation in the Planning Act that have happened since the approval of the official plan. It just clarifies how it's to be used and what it's to be used for. The second item talks about the opportunity for council to consider the delegation of approval authority for some itemized elements of approval. Again, that's an opportunity for council to consider, not a requirement. But it's important to have it in the official plan so you can have that conversation. Item 3 is really talking about amending the appropriate schedules in your official plan to recognize that there is now a new secondary plan for Howard-Bouffard. And then there are new schedules that identify the land use, natural heritage, and road structure that are being planned for Howard-Bouffard. So those are maps that specifically deal with the Howard-Bouffard area. And then the last item is, of course, integrating the new chapter that we call the Howard-Bouffard Secondary Plan that will be integrated into the official plan. The first chapter is the natural heritage system, and I'm going to let Grant go through a few slides on that.
Thank you, Ron. Mayor Meloche, members of council. The natural heritage system is made up of basically 2 layers. The most important layer is the environmental protection designation, and that layer includes the natural heritage features that are significant at a provincial level. So those are natural heritage features that are defined by the provincial policy statement and meet certain criteria of significance. And those are your most important features. The other features, the other layer is called the feature assessment or the restoration overlay. And those are the other natural heritage features that may not meet the threshold for being significant features, but they're still important and they still perform an ecological function, and they need to be built into the natural heritage system. Those features also typically need a little more study in order to determine what their significance is and how best to implement them in the natural heritage system. Next slide, please. So what this slide shows is the proposed natural heritage system. The dark green is the designation layer. The lighter green is the feature overlay, restoration overlay. And you can see it does comprise a fair amount of area within the secondary plan area. And we have also attempted to create connections and linkages between some of the core natural heritage features. Next slide, please. What this slide shows is the natural heritage system that currently exists within the secondary plan area. And what I'd like to do is present a bit of a comparison between what you currently have within your natural heritage system versus what we're proposing to include in the expanded natural heritage system. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So what you can see on this slide is what's being proposed as the natural heritage system. And I draw your attention to the table on the right. It's hard to see at this scale, but I'll hit on some of the most important points. Your current natural heritage system is 360 acres in size within the secondary plan area. What we're proposing is a total of 766 acres in size. So that is an increase of 113%. So basically a twofold increase. The other major aspect of this that I believe is very important is the amount of natural heritage that's within the designation versus the amount that's within the overlay. The designation being the most important. And from this table, you can see that the increase in what is actually being designated is significant. It's 300% increase in the areas that are receiving the highest level of protection. So that's something that we believe is very important. So you're increasing in area and you're increasing in the level of protection afforded to those areas. Next slide, please. So the natural heritage system within the Howard Buffard Secondary Plan area has to be in conformity with the natural heritage system in the county official plan. And what this slide does is it shows where there is congruence between the two systems. So the areas that are currently shown in red are part of the county's natural heritage system and part of the Howard Buffard Natural Heritage System. So you can see there is a high level of congruence between what's being what's controlled at the county level, what's planned at the county level versus what's planned within Howard Buffard. Now there are some areas where the two differ. If you look at the yellow, that is where we're proposing additional areas within Howard Buffard that aren't in the county OP. And if you look at the green, that's areas within the county OP and that differ from what's in Howard Buffard. So just to speak a bit to that, some of these green areas are actually fields and they don't currently constitute natural heritage features. So while it might be important at some point to establish a connection in some of these cases, the science isn't necessarily there to support it at this time because those aren't currently natural heritage features. So while it is important to connect and create these linkages, it may not be necessarily possible at this time. The other thing I wanted to hit on was the fact that the county official plan specifies that municipalities should target 15% within the natural heritage system. So that would be the amount of natural cover within the municipality. Within the Howard Buffard Secondary Plan area, we're hitting 33%. So basically 1/3 of the whole secondary plan is going to be within the natural heritage system. So that is a considerable increase in what is being required at the county level. The other thing of importance is that the federal government has prepared some guidance documents. And basically they ask the question, how much natural habitat is enough within a municipality? And the federal government identifies 30% as the target for a municipality to have in their natural heritage system. So as you can see within the Howard Buffard Secondary Plan area, we're hitting 33% 33%. So we're actually slightly exceeding that target that has been established by the federal government. And what that will also help do is provide additional natural heritage throughout the entire municipality. So it creates a little bit of a surplus that allows the municipality as a whole to meet its targets. That's it for me. Thank you very much. I'll hand it back to Ron.
Thanks, Grant. I'm going to talk very briefly about the structural elements of land use within Howard Bouffard. As I've mentioned, these are derived mostly from the designations that are already in your official plan. Some are new that deal with specific contextual issues that only occur in Howard Bouffard. Certainly there's the mixed-use corridor. That is identified today in your official plan along Laurier Parkway, although it is quite conceptual. In the secondary plan, we have attempted to understand the lot fabric and to create a corridor that could be developed for mixed-use development. And it's very important to talk about mixed use because the intent is that it is both an opportunity for retail, service, commercial, and restaurant uses, as well as office uses, in combination with residential development. It's not intended simply to be a residential corridor. We're generating a lot of people here, and they will need opportunities to shop, to eat, to work, and to get personal services. So it's a pretty important conceptual element that it is a mixed-use corridor. The residential districts are fairly self-explanatory. They will include a host of permitted residential dwelling types. It will also accommodate schools and parks that are fundamentally important for residential neighborhoods. We have a business park way out on the east end of Howard Bouffard that has been part of the official plan for quite some time, and that is retained. We do have a golf course, and that has some policies that go along with how that will continue to function into the future. And of course, your amazing Vollmer Recreation Center, which is a wonderful asset that will provide recreational facilities not only for the entire town, but for the new and future residents of Howard Bouffard. The plan also includes a host of symbols. Symbols are used for elementary schools, the existing secondary school, public parks, and places of worship, which are existing. We also have stormwater management facilities. We use the symbols because they're conceptual. We know we need them. Some have status through the stormwater management environmental assessment, but nonetheless, the symbols always provide flexibility for them to be moved, for the sizes and shapes of the properties to be articulated through the development approval process, and of course, how they're dealt with in the zoning bylaw will have an important impact on how landowners may be compensated for the delivery of those facilities. That's why they're symbolic. Next slide. This is the pattern of development. This has been evolving over quite some time, as I'm sure you're all aware. It does identify all of those symbols that I talked about. Some are existing, some are proposed within the community that will evolve over the next 20, 30, or even 40 years. The natural heritage system, only the key elements are identified here. You'll note that the overlay is truly an overlay, so there is an underlying designation that is awaiting the further study to determine the significance of those features and what the boundaries might be in the future. Certainly, we've seen this basic pattern of development evolve since the early days of this plan, and now It's coming to its conclusion through this process. Again, I want to talk about the fact that while the secondary plan is a step in the process, it's the first step. You still have many, many steps to go, and the ultimate development, which will likely look something like this, will be massaged, articulated in more detail as we work through the levels of detail through the subsequent approval processes. Next slide. Secondary plans and the plan always include discussion about municipal service infrastructure and utilities. These are important elements of the plan. It's really important as the density of development is going up from the plan that was put in place 20 years ago. We also have to provide additional opportunities for mobility that includes how enhanced transit will occur through this area to connect it to the rest of LaSalle and the broader Windsor-Essex community. Certainly, municipal water and wastewater is a very important component here, keeping in mind the constraints on the wastewater plant and the deals and agreements with the city of Windsor. Stormwater management, a fundamental component of this plan, and we rely on all the hard work that has been done over the last few years on the environmental assessments that articulate an important stormwater management strategy, including a major new drain that will provide for most of the secondary plan the important stormwater strategy. Public and private utilities are always part of a plan. They need to be provided. Everybody wants electricity and cable and all of those important things that make your daily life work. Implementation and interpretation, fairly short sections that are typical of all secondary plans. About the only part of the plan that is relatively typical. Next slide. This is the transportation and active transportation plan. The roads come from your transportation master plan that was done prior to the official plan being approved. There has been no additions to this, although it has been tested by a separate consultant that was part of our team, and they have agreed that this plan is appropriate for the ongoing development of Howard Bouffard. Of course, these are the primary roads. The development application process will articulate a whole level of local roads that will also be required to facilitate and serve the growing population. However, in a secondary plan, it is typical simply to show the primary roads, the arterials and collectors. Of course, the most important road is the Laurier Parkway. It's also the important focal point of the density and mixture of uses that are anticipated in this plan. Next slide. As you're aware, we did receive a host of comments and through staff and through LGL, we tried to provide some fulsome responses, and some of those responses have resulted in some changes to the plan. So I'm going to talk about 4 of them in particular, and it's a bit technical, so I hope you'll bear with me. And some of them are specifically related to how we deal with various designations and properties through the zoning bylaw, which is not before you tonight. We expect that the pre-zoning approach will come back to council once the county has approved the plan. Doesn't make sense to do the zoning until you have the plan in place. So there were a number of concerns raised about how the natural heritage system was going to be identified in pre-zoning and how that might affect land values through any future development opportunity or not development opportunity. What we decided to do through zoning The strategy in the secondary plan has remained the same, but through zoning, when you see that, that will zone the environmental protection designation, because we believe that we have the science available through the LGL work that supports the environmental protection designation as it is identified in the LGL report. We decided to not zone the feature assessment restoration overlay, because those lands have not yet been fully articulated in terms of the extent and the level of significance of the feature. What we've decided to do with those is leave them in the deferred urban zoning until such time as the necessary environmental work has been done to confirm the extent and level of significance of those features. Next slide, please. With respect to the Laurier Parkway, there was some concerns raised that the policies were requiring a mixture of uses, and that the mixture of uses was too aggressive. We had a look at those, and it's really important to note that we're doing a plan here for the next 20, 30, 40 years. If we don't require the mix of uses, you won't get it, and you have one chance to do that, and it's now. I heard through the consultation process that it was a fundamental element of this plan to ensure that retail and service commercial uses and restaurants were provided along Laurier Parkway in combination with the levels of residential intensity that we anticipate. So we've done a little bit of tweaking to these policies. We've reduced the requirement in the Howard Bouffard Mixed Use 1 from 60 to 50% of gross floor area. That's in line with other designations in your official plan. For example, where we sit today, that would be the requirement. We've left the Howard Bouffard Mixed Use 2 at 25% of at-grade gross floor area. We believe that is appropriate. We've also included a policy that says if you have a site that's large enough, and you do have some sites that are quite large, that the municipality can consider developments that are comprehensive in nature, that include the prescribed amount of non-residential gross floor area, and that could facilitate standalone residential development in combination. But the intent is still to make sure it's a mixed-use development, not a residential-only development. Certainly, I've added wording to the secondary plan to articulate what non-residential land uses are, so that everyone is clear what that includes and what it does not include. So we hope we've clarified the position on the requirements for non-residential uses within the Laurier Parkway corridor, and that can be achieved over the next 20, 30, 40 years, because it's an important part of the plan. Next slide. Similar to the restoration and further study overlay approach, there was a concern raised that in the pre-zoning, and again, it's not before you tonight, but they are shown symbolically. Schools, parks are shown symbolically on the schedules to the secondary plan. They have not been pre-zoned for schools and parks based on the very legitimate concern that if we pre-zone them, that predetermined a land value, and it's understood that those lands, if they are to be acquired, either by the school board or by the municipality, that it would be appropriate to establish fair market value without the predetermined zoning on it. This is directly to address a concern that I think was fair about reducing the value of land artificially through the zoning bylaw. So we've left all of that in the deferred urban zoning, and that allows the opportunity for a development application to more specifically articulate the shape, scale, size of those sites in order for the municipality or the school boards to work towards acquisition, and if acquisition cannot be achieved, then they can be zoned for residential development. Next slide. We did get a very specific comment about the protection of an existing industrial use that has some impacts on adjacent land uses. And the concern was that the pre-designation and the pre-zoning of those lands without an appropriate compatibility study is not appropriate. The Planning Act and the provincial planning statement have been adjusted over the last couple of years to ensure that existing industrial uses are protected from the encroachment of sensitive land uses like residential development. So we've added a policy specific to the lands that, I don't know if you can see it, but they're outlined in black, and there's an SPA 2 in it. That is south of the existing development that is considered, I believe, a Class 2 industrial use. The specific policy that goes with that is the requirement for a compatibility study and the implementation of any mitigation measures that would be required to allow that existing industry to continue. That's fair. There has been a subsequent correspondence from the landowner. I referenced the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation, Parks, D6 guidelines. There is one other guideline that they would like referenced. We can either add the reference to that, or we can delete D6 and just make it a generic provincial guidelines document. That can be done as an editorial adjustment between the time if you choose to adopt and then send it to the county for approval. It's a minor adjustment for clarification. Totally fair request, but I think we've done what we need to do. We've identified those lands that are not already zoned for development to prepare that compatibility study and identify mitigation measures. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to Gudrun to wrap up.
Okay, back to me. So we're hopeful that that provides a summary and update on the secondary plan and the changes that we've made following the statutory public meeting. As Ron had suggested, this is a process, and we are at the stage in the process now. We are seeking council endorsement and adoption of the secondary plan. Provided council concurs, that OPA number 2 will be forwarded to the County of Essex as the approval authority for official plan amendments. So following that process and seeing that application through to the appeal period, we will be back in front of council looking for approval of 2 important implementation documents, which include the comprehensive implementing zoning bylaw for Howard Bouffard, as well as the wastewater plant allocation protocol, which essentially takes that finite resource that we have under contract with the City of Windsor and attempts to put some guardrails around the implementation and allocation of that resource. It will be a very helpful tool for us as we navigate the development approval process across Howard Bouffard. So following that, we will be in a position to unlock development in this area, which is something that has been a long time coming. So With that, that concludes our presentation tonight. We are available for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. So we have a number of delegations here this evening, some in person, some via Zoom, and then we've also have 4 written submissions that council has had a chance to review. So at this time, I'm going to call each of the delegation up one at a time. You'll be given 5 minutes to go through your presentation and ask any questions. Following all of the presentations from the delegations, then we will allow administration to answer any questions that maybe are left out there, not answered as of yet, though I think you've covered a lot of it. And then after that, we will allow council to follow with any questions. So first on the list, we have Carlo Spagnolo, who's appearing via Zoom. Are you with us? Yes. We can't hear you yet.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here. I'm here representing my parents, Ippolito and Regina Spagnolo, who own property in LaSalle, lots 44 to 57 on the to-be-built Pamela Street. I don't know if you could pull up my letter that I sent over earlier, but I have 3 enclosures that I wanted to call to your attention.
I don't have the ability to pull those up, but if you want to just...
I could screen share if you want. Happy to do that.
Is that a possibility? Is that okay? Sure.
Oh, it's disabled.
Okay. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Let us know if you're able to.
Let me see. Yes, I'm able to. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this first screenshot that I included in the letter that we submitted shows their property here in blue. And this was from August of 2021, where the property was designated as deferred urban. And we submitted concerns regarding the designation back then, and we were told that a stormwater study had to be completed. We weren't told about any other sort of land studies or anything that would jeopardize the property other than stormwater studies. And on here, you could see natural environmental. I'm not sure if you could see my cursor, but I'm encircling it here in green. There's natural environmental already on here, right? So we thought that natural environmental was already kind of figured out in terms of federal mandates, et cetera. So going on to my next enclosure, can you guys see this photo?
Yep.
So this is a photo of, their property whereabouts. It's probably more than just their property, but you can see that the land has been farmed for years. And there's really just a hedgerow of trees here, right? So this is Suzanne Street back here, and this would be Valiant Street on this side. And I believe that these trees here are being designated as, you didn't call it natural environmental, you called it something else. I think it's kind of a to be determined status, but that there's vegetation there and potential natural heritage, but it hasn't yet been designated. So, in their opinion, I think in a lot of the landowners' opinions, to us, this doesn't seem like a natural heritage type landscape, just given the sparse trees and given the farmland. So, we feel like this should be at least allowed to be challenged by us, and that we should get a detailed explanation for why this has happened. I understand that you have to meet a mandate, but taking land from people and designate it as natural heritage to me isn't the right approach. So that's why we're here. And, you know, if we have to make up the difference to meet the federal requirement, we should get the land expropriated and not just taken away, because this has been land that my parents have owned since the 80s, since before LaSalle was even a town, and they've been paying taxes and maintaining it for years. So they feel pretty strongly about opposing this. And here you can see how like this translates to what you're now calling natural environmental here, where you know you're showing this dark green area with their property here, basically fully encompassed is natural environmental. And again, a lot of these other properties were always showing as natural environmental, but this is a new one. And you know, again, we feel like this study should be challenged.
Okay,
And that's all I have.
okay. I know I said I'd do questions at the end, but since they're on Zoom, I might try to just do questions now with anyone on Zoom, if that's easier. So, administration, is there anything you want to add to the questions or comments that they made?
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we've integrated into the secondary plan policies which allow landowners to contest the designation as well as the zoning. And so anyone that comes forward for development application in Howard Bouffard is going to have to do an environmental impact study that will support and justify the existence of the natural feature or the non-existence of the natural feature. And that particular study will be used as justification to support any application that comes through the planning department. So there is that built-in opportunity that Mr. Spagnuolo is requesting to be able to challenge the existing designation or zoning. I don't know if Grant has anything else that he would want to add to that, but that policy is already integrated into the secondary plan.
Thank you very much. Do you have anything you want to add?
I have nothing further to add. That's the essence of it.
Okay. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Spagnuolo. We are going to move on to our second delegation, which is Jonathan Choquette. Choquette? I feel like I may have said that wrong. Choquette? Choquette.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm Dr. Jonathan Choquette. I'm a lead biologist with Wildlife Preservation Canada. And I just wanted to speak today about connectivity. So I have been involved in this process as an interested person. My last comment letter was submitted on the 9th of February in 2024. So I think the current plan misses a critical opportunity to incorporate ecological design into the upgrades that are proposed for the east and west Cahill Drain, so that these corridors can actually function as wildlife corridors between the LaSalle Woods to the north and the River Canard ecosystem to the south. And I was very pleased to see the town propose LaSalle Woods be added to the National Urban Park study area. I think that's fantastic. And I think it's important that we continue to honor that commitment by making sure that it doesn't remain isolated as a natural feature. Most of us don't want to sterilize the landscape, but even when we protect natural areas, there's an erosion that happens, so to speak. And actually we lose plants and animals over time when they're isolated from nearby natural areas. And so essentially, it's important that both the east and west Cahill drains in this plan be maintained and designed in such a way that they actually function, right? So they're listed in the plan as a natural environment, but there's just certain key elements that could be incorporated to make sure that they actually function as are intended in this plan, so that they physically connect the natural areas north and south of them. And this is consistent with the LaSalle Bouffard, Howard Bouffard design guidelines. So in Appendix 1, there's 2.5.11, 2.5.13, and 2.8 that speak to the importance of connectivity and corridors and using drains, actually, for wildlife connectivity. So there's a real opportunity here that the town has at this planning stage, rather, to design a natural heritage system and a corridor system that will actually function as a corridor system. It'll function as intended, especially for species at risk wildlife, and species at risk reptiles are my specialty. So I just wanted to point out 4 ways that I think the system could be improved in order to meet that goal. First one is building redundancy into the system. So the west branch of Cahill Drain has been identified in the LGL study as a primary corridor. But if that corridor fails, the system falls apart. And in addition to that, that particular corridor will be bisected by 6 roads after build out. And I know quite well that many animals, smaller animals, just can't cross roads effectively. So the corridor really isn't a corridor if you have roads severing it. Thus, the east branch of the Cahill Drain, I think, should also be considered as a primary corridor in addition to the west branch. And that would actually build redundancy into the system. You'd have 2 corridors running north-south instead of 1 primary corridor. On that note, a second recommendation would be to attain a minimum buffer width of 30 meters for both the west and east Cahill Drain, whereas currently only the west branch is identified as having a buffer of 30 meters, and so a 60-meter corridor width, whereas the east branch should also be achieving that minimum width. So I want to just point out on that note that minimum width is generally sufficient for species at risk reptiles, but it's at the low end for any larger animals like deer, whereas a corridor width of up to 100 meters is recommended for connectivity of larger animals. Third point I wanted to make is to avoid completely piping both drains where they cross Bouffard Road. So I'm not sure if this has been updated, but my last comment letter pointed to the recommended plans that included 845 meters at approximately and 345 meters for the west and east drains respectively to be piped under Bouffard. And if you're using the drain as a corridor, not just conveyance of water, but conveyance of wildlife, so to speak, and you put it in a pipe, essentially you're disconnecting it for terrestrial wildlife. That was the third point. Fourth point is a design guideline as you build out, but essentially to incorporate under road culverts, so you will have these corridors bisected by roads, and to incorporate under road culverts that include the shoreline. So not just water under road, but that actually include shoreline to allow movement of terrestrial wildlife. Otherwise, these corridors don't function at all. So, 4 recommendations, just to just quickly summarize them, was to build redundancy into the system, so east and west Cahill Drain, to achieve a minimum buffer width of 30 meters for both of those drains, to avoid completely piping those drains under Bouffard Road, and then to incorporate proper functional crossings under roads to accommodate both aquatic and terrestrial wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We will move on to the next delegation, which is John DeMarco.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you very much for allowing me once again to be part of the very important, maybe the most important discussion in the history of planning in LaSalle about the Howard Bouffard Secondary Plan. It's a discussion that is far from over because unfortunately some key issues are still being, let me say minimum, oh, I like that other picture. I don't know who put that in there. That's not quite what we're going to achieve in LaSalle, but something very close. Remember, hopefully a national urban park is coming to LaSalle if we play our cards right. So let's make LaSalle look like it's ready for a national urban park. My presentation today is shorter than some of those I've made before because I'm really trying to focus on what's most critical. There are many, many issues concerning the plan. There are some very positive aspects. I'm in favor of developing housing in Howard Bouffard, increasing the supply of housing, making housing affordable, allowing people to live in a beautiful new community. But as I've said before, we can have it all. We can have our cake and eat it too, because there's enough land there that we can have an outstanding central natural corridor, which will also solve most of our problems of flooding. We can have all that and still have plenty of land for development. I'm a landowner in Howard Bouffard as well, a small landowner. I think everybody can win here, landowners, people, and nature. So what is the number one issue? That the plan still clearly contravenes the County of Essex official plan, and for that reason, I suggest it's not ready to be approved. It's strange. It's strange. After at least a year and a half of discussion, and this point has been raised a number of times, it has never been answered directly in a way that I can understand of why the county official plan can be ignored as concerns natural heritage. We heard just this evening for the first time, you could easily have missed it, but I know what it was. I know it was a reference to the restoration areas that have been removed from the plan, but I'm going to spell it out more clearly. Next slide, please. So that is, you've already seen this tonight, that is the proposed natural heritage system. And we heard this is an increase over the previous natural heritage system. That is actually not correct. It's true that some areas have been upgraded from what was our level 2 of protection to level 1, and that's great. That's good news. So some of the recommendations we made previously have been heard, but the third level of protection in the county natural heritage plan, which is the restoration opportunities layer, has been largely ignored, removed. It's invisible. It's invisible in any of the reports. It's invisible in any of the plan documents, except for one slide that was briefly flashed tonight where for the first time it was kind of referred to, but not really fully explained. So next slide, please. Those orange areas are in the County of Essex official plan. They have associated regulations. They're called Restoration Opportunities Overlay. An important point is that a town plan or a secondary plan legally has to conform with the County of Essex official plan. The town can do more. It can go further in terms of natural heritage than the county plan, but it cannot do less unless the county plan is amended. All those orange areas are still in the newly adopted County of Essex official plan. They were in the previous plan from 2014, so everybody should have known about them all this time. They were reaffirmed last fall with the new official plan without any objection as far as I've heard, but they have been ignored in this secondary plan. And as I say, in my opinion, without justification, but certainly not following the legal process. And while we're on that slide, I want to thank Jonathan for pointing out the importance of buffers along drains, but that applies mostly to animals that live in water or near water. But what about forests? We need to join forests too, with forest corridors, and forest corridors need to be wider than just a drain. And the people who did that work to develop those restoration areas shown in orange here, a lot of work went into it. And I'll just, I didn't bring the whole report, but I found it recently online. This is IRCA Biodiversity Conservation Strategy comprehensive version, and it contains the full 193 pages of full and detailed justification why those orange areas were designated as restoration opportunities. I agree they're mostly farmland, while some have already been built on, possibly without following the correct procedure. The remaining areas are mostly farmland, and that was intentional. They were identified as the areas of farmland that are most critical to restoring the connections among our natural areas. So there was very good logic behind those. It was a very scientific study. Nobody should say it was not scientific. There were not one or two people, but panels of experts that worked on that. And this has been the official legal restoration opportunities overlay ever since then. Next slide, please.
Mr. DeMarco, you're well over your 5 minutes.
Okay,
So if you
thank
can
you.
just summarize real quickly, please.
I'll summarize with this slide, and I'll leave you the rest to read. These are the regulations that apply to the restoration overlay. I won't read them, just to point out this is a clear procedure if you want to open up these areas for development. This procedure has not been followed at all. The LGL report is there. I'm happy that on the same screen we saw earlier, it's not a statutory report, so it does not in any way modify or override the county plan. In fact, no resolution passed in this room can override the County of Essex official plan, as far as I know. So that is the situation today. The plan is still not in compliance, and out of prudence, and considering also, I wasn't expecting this, but that there are only 3 members of council present, I strongly suggest it would be prudent to defer adoption of this official plan until the town gets independent legal advice on what steps are actually needed to withdraw those areas in orange from the restoration overlay that is still part of the county plan. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Todd Klingbeil.
Madam Mayor, Council, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Gudrun and Ron and Grant, thank you guys for your time too. I know you guys spent a lot of time on that. And we all have the same objective here. We want to see, we've got land in this area. I'm representing my parents, Joan and Gary Klingbeil. And we have some property that is in between Valiant.
Sorry, can you just get closer to the mic?
Yep, sorry. So we have some property in between Valiant and Pamela Street that runs just behind Malden Road and then back quite a bit actually back there. So we have the same objective. We want to develop this land too. And I understand, Gudrun, your point earlier about the fact that we can still apply, after. But I think that places undue financial burden on people that have land in here, when I think that when you look at, and I don't have the actual document that I forwarded to you guys as well, but in there you can see that the land, much like Carlo presented, there's basically 2 rows of trees, and that whole area is about 42 meters wide. And on either side of it, excuse me, there are 2 rows of trees. One of them is the ditch that the town created that ran along Pamela Street, and that's where part of those trees are. From the air, it might seem that looks like this whole big forested area, but it is not. It's this area that has been farmed. On the other side of it has been farmed. That was my parents' property between Valiant and Pamela. And then further down, it's actually my parents' backyard. And then it goes further down, you're looking at what Carlo was presenting. So the same thing. So on either side, there's one strip of trees, and then there's about 40 meters maybe of, 21 and a half meters that are clear. It was farmland. That land that we're talking about is actually, it was in addition to the County of Essex plan that had the natural heritage assessment. So this was added since then. And I just think that we're placing the burden on the landowners now to go back and look at this and say that this is not natural heritage. If you look at the land as farmland and the way it was being used, it is not. There's no significant trees in that area that would say that it should be designated as anything special. the size of it and the fact that it was previously used as farmland, I don't think it could be claimed as a significant woodland. It's only literally 10-meter strip of trees, and I'm going to say it's literally it's a ditch wide, a small ditch, and then 21 and a half meters, and then another 10 meters on the other side of that. So I don't think if you look at the definition of the significant woodland, that does not apply to that area. And I think it places undue hardship on the landowners to now have to go back and prove, even though, in discussions with Gudrun and Grant, some of this assessment was done fairly superficially. So I don't know if that was done by a drone or how that was accomplished. But if you walk that property, it becomes very obvious that that's not a big wooded lot. So I'm just asking for, one, a little more time for us to reassess this thing. We're landowners in this area. We're not professionals. Most of us have jobs, and we're trying to get those done at the same time. We don't have time to go back and look at this. Originally, it was designated as deferred urban. When it was designated as natural heritage, most of us didn't even understand what that meant. But I think it's important that everybody understand, and I'm sure most of you do, designating that land as natural heritage destroys the value of that land. It cannot be developed. It basically, my parents, Ernie, our neighbor there, he's got 10 and a half acres. It basically destroys the whole value of that land. So to me, it's very serious what's being done. I don't think it's appropriate, but I think even if you look at the definition under the Natural Heritage Act, it is not a significant woodland. So under that premise alone, I think I'd like to have that reconsidered. I'd rather have it taken off there rather than placing the burden on the individual landowners to go back and reassess that. And that's basically where I'm at. And I further down, if you look in that proposed, there's some roadways there. There's a roadway that actually runs right through that significant woodland. So it just seems like it's inconsistent with, we're going to claim that that's a natural heritage, and then we're going to run a road right through it a little bit farther down. So I guess, in short, that's all I'm getting at. So I just think it should be reconsidered.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, thanks.
Our next delegate will be appearing via Zoom, and it's Mr. Peter Valente.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, members of council, friends and neighbors. My name is Peter Valente. I am the president of Valente Development Corporation, Tuscany Oaks Ltd., and LA Land Corp. Those companies make up one of the largest landowners in the Bouffard disputed area of the secondary plan. And we made some comments at the public meeting. And a lot of the comments some of the comments were taken into the plan that you have before you. However, I've been trying to develop land in this area since 2007. So there's an expression, once bitten, twice shy. I've been bitten. Our companies have spent over $100,000 in studies, plans, following the old Bouffard plan. Never were able to unlock any sort of value from our development whatsoever. And now we're here again, and I still think the plan needs work. I've been developing land in Windsor-Essex County for 25 years. The biggest challenge of development in our area, bar none, is environmental protection. And my biggest issue with the plan that's before you is some of our lands are being designated for protection. And I can try to share my screen here. And I don't know if you'll be able to follow my cursor, but can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm pointing my cursor, I don't know if you can see that, on what's going to be the future Ream Road. And we have these drains that are running through this property. This is known as a Klingbeil piece. We purchased one property from, I believe it's even Todd's family. And there's another gentleman that owns the other part of this land. And I'm not making I'm making specific comments for my company's benefit, but I've also want to bring to your attention a mistake that could cause a lot of pain for future development in this area. So I'm here to cry wolf, so to speak. You have two parts of this plan, one of which is the pictures, and the other part are the words. And the plan that's before you, I'm told, don't worry, Peter, it's just a high-level overview. I am worried, okay? I am very concerned. We're expanding the natural heritage system, but the biggest complaint that I have, or the biggest issue I want to bring to council's attention, is the green around the existing water courses. And that green is for natural protection. If this act changes again, which happens all the time, the act gets updated, they add more and more species to the list of protection through the act, the Environmental Protection Act. And if these lines are left there in that color, if they keep adding more and more species, and the other thing I want to bring to your attention is some of these species that we're trying to protect aren't even endangered. They're only endangered in Canada. So across the river, if you go to Michigan, they have the same species like garter snakes. They're not protected because they're abundant, because Windsor-Essex County is a very unique microclimate that's hosting species that are special to Canada because of our unique geographic location, but not necessarily endangered in the world or even in North America for that matter. And, the consultant's done a wonderful job here. I'm not saying this is an easy work. Ron's done a great job. Gudrun's done a great job. You've got a great team. The only issue I have is that we're, first of all, designating part of our lands that are, and this plan should be clearer, in my opinion, because in this world of technology, we have great technology, and there's no reason why we shouldn't boil this down and put property lines on the secondary plan. That boggles my mind. But my thing is update the secondary plan to better reflect the property boundaries. Number two, remove the natural heritage designation on the secondary plan drawing around the existing drains. And that's not just on my property. I think that should be everywhere. And there should be no natural designation on any of our holdings. Preservation can be determined through an EIA, an environmental impact study, at a later date. On the Klingbeil holdings on the northeast corner, an underlying proposed zoning is shown as natural environment designation, which is designation without compensation. So that is my issue. I think the plan also should be deferred this evening. I think that they're a little bit more work, a little bit more consultation with some of the developing community, and I think we'll have a better result as it pertains to this. No one's ever going to say, hey, this is a very patient man you got in front of you. No, I'm a salesperson, and normally salespeople that are patient aren't very successful. So I'm very anxious for development. It's just I don't want to see something that's going forward and it gives everybody a big stomach ache after, because we've designated, and this designation of the secondary plan is going to inform the zoning. So we're going to zone land natural environment that should not be zoned natural environment. It can be studied at a later date. There's no reason to add any of this green coloring. I know that LGL did their cursory review, let's call it cursory review of the area, and they're saying, well, it's significant. Well, give us a chance to really study it. Let's not go overboard here. We got 33% natural area. We're exceeding Canada's targets. We have landowners here that have made investments, not just myself, other landowners like Mr. Spagnuolo and his family. We have to respect that and also respect the environment. But I believe we've gone a little too far. Even this other section of the West Branch.
Valente?
Yeah.
Sorry, you're well over 5 minutes. If you could just quickly summarize.
I got 30 seconds left. Okay. So if you see my cursor here, this is the east branch of the Cahill Drain. This is stated in your documents for removal. So why would we be designating something that is slated for removal, because it's not necessary for the drainage that's going to work in this area, as natural environment, and then going to zone it for natural environment? That land might be able to be developed into homes, and they're not important to the turtles or the snakes or the plants or the animals, and it's not that significant. We can study that later. I believe some of these drains should have a feature overlay, not a natural environment designation, because that is going to create a problem.
Thank you very much, Mr. Valente.
Thank you for hearing me. I appreciate it.
Next, we have John Coulthard.
Good evening. My name is John Coulthard, and I'm the president of 2442760 Ontario Limited, the island of industry that Ron pointed out. As you may recall, I spoke on behalf of my company at the October 2024 statutory public meeting to convey the importance of including ensured protection of the business park from encroaching sensitive land uses. In addition to my speaking here tonight, my legal representative has also issued a far more detailed and technical submission of our expectations to the town and the county of Essex. Although some of what we were expecting to see in the plan has been incorporated, how it has been incorporated doesn't go far enough to ensure my property is protected. I'll begin by pointing out that the comments we made in October were not completely summarized and entered into the public comments matrix. There is nothing included in any of the secondary plan documents before council today that includes a single reference to the NPC 300 environmental noise guideline, as we were expecting. We note that our facility has not been identified as a Class 2 industrial property on a scalable map according to the D-Series guidelines. We note that neither our 300-meter area of influence nor our 70-meter buffer zone has been identified on a scalable map according to the D-Series guidelines. We note that the wording in SPA 2 only focuses on the long-term economic viability of the existing on-site employment uses, but must also ensure any future uses as well by removing the word existing from the text. We note that within SPA 2, there is no requirement for the preparation of a land use compatibility study to be completed by a professional licensed in the province of Ontario. And we note that from Appendix 3, the terms of reference technical studies, the proposed planning rationale report that makes reference to the compatibility of adjacent built forms in the vicinity and only considers certain policy areas is not effective. Missing is a standalone requirement dedicated to conducting a land use compatibility study. A land use compatibility study must be required for development applications within our potential influence area and must include all the statutory and MECP guidelines. In the comment matrix, planning has emphasized that there is an existing positive relationship between the business park and the existing northerly sensitive uses, despite the less than 50 meters of separation between them. The comment, to me, infers that the D6 guidelines are somehow irrelevant, given how close the industrial site is to these houses. What isn't realized is that required MECP on-site mitigation is in place for necessary sources of noise. The stationary and point sources of other emissions are located 70 to 100 meters from these existing sensitive receptors. The background noise caused by passing traffic on the 6th concession exceeds the sound emissions of the current operations. This is why the relationship is so effective in this direction. The attempt to downplay the separation distance by the planning department only further emphasizes why our request to integrate the MECP guidelines into the Howard Bouffard secondary plan is so important. The D6 is actually a common sense approach for the planning authority to use to ensure land use compatibility. It's based on historical MECP complaint data, which has been used to establish recommended minimum influence areas and minimum separation distances. Further, the objective of this guide, the D6, is to prevent or minimize the encroachment of sensitive land use upon industrial land and vice versa, as these two types of land uses are normally incompatible due to possible adverse effects on sensitive land uses created by industrial operations. I therefore request that this council should not receive that report from the planning department as presented and request that it be revised and submitted at a later date. In addition, council should defer approval of the bylaw to approve the official plan amendment number 2 until such time as the issues identified here are revised, and further that council should not approve the motion to forward OPA number 2 to the County of Essex for its review and approval until such time the documents are revised. Finally, to foster a more productive interaction and improve communication, I think that it would be best if the planning department could work with those of us who have submitted comments and their responses in the public comments matrix to make sure that they are complete by closing the loop with each commenter so that there is confirmation of the contents and closure comments, even if that closure is agreeing to disagree. Thank you. I appreciate you listening to me and acting on my requests.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Ralph Mio.
Thank you. I have to start by stating Seven Lakes' objection to some of the environmental designation on our property, on our golf course. And I have to do that simply to preserve our right to file appeals. However, overall, we are in support of the plan. We just need some modification to ensure that what has already been done to allow the golf course to operate for the long run will in fact do that. There are two designations on our property. One is feature overlay, which has built in some safeguards for the continued operation of the golf course. And we are happy with that. We realize that if you ever want to do anything with that part of it, we have to do an environmental impact study, and we're okay with that. But there is a second area which has been designated environmental protection, and that is the corridor along the municipal drain that crosses the golf course. There are 9 golf holes that play back and forth across that drain. And the way I read the document right now, in an environmentally protected area, we cannot play golf. So there needs to be an amendment, a clarification, whatever we want to call it. Either the dark green area from the municipal drain is removed that will solve all of our concerns, or some of the same safeguards that have been built into the section that deals with the feature overlay study has to be added, also repeated into the environmentally protected area. And a permitted use, an existing golf course has to become a permitted use along with what is already stated as a permitted use for agriculture. I don't believe those are difficult things to do. They can be done prior to any documentation moving forward. This year, it's 30 years that I bought Seven Lakes property. In 1995, there was no secondary plan. There was no Loria Parkway. There was no Volmer Complex. The town has come a long way. But I've also watched this Howard Bouffard being studied over and over again, and here we are one more time. I'm of the opinion that you need to move forward with this. I know some people have asked for deferrals, but you are never going to satisfy everyone. I've seen it repeatedly in 30 years. Planning is a very difficult issue. It needs a lot of compromise. I'm glad I'm not sitting in your chair to make these decisions. But we have been at this almost 2 years already. I think it's time to move on and hopefully get the plan approved so that some development can occur. We have a shortage of housing. We have ridiculously high prices in the LaSalle area for service lots simply because there's no supply. And the only way we're ever going to fix that is to move forward and remove the roadblocks to get some housing built. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. So those are the delegations that we have on the list for tonight. I'm going to now ask administration if they could come back to the tables, and then we can have, if you have anything to comment on, we'll do that before we go to council questions. So I don't know if there's anything that you've heard that you want to specifically comment on, or if you want us right to council questions. It's up to you. I don't know if you heard something that kind of you wanted to clarify or clear up. Anything? Nope.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there was a lot that was shared. I think I would like to just clarify for council that the natural heritage work that was completed by LGL was the appropriate level of detail for a secondary plan exercise. And so what LGL did was they took the provincial policy statement and they applied the criteria that's identified in the PPS across the Howard Bouffard secondary plan area. And what resulted from that was the natural heritage system that you're seeing on the land use plan. So it's not us arbitrarily assigning designations or overlays to properties. It is complying with the legislation and the criteria in the PPS.
Thank you very much. I think that helps with a lot of what was said earlier. Members of council, do you have any questions you would like clarification on or comment on any of the questions put forward? Councillor Burns?
Yes, to our team in front, Mr. Mio's concerns are very simple. I think that can be addressed in this document, and I don't know if it can be addressed or updated before it goes to county. I was very shocked that he didn't have more concerns in our last meeting, because I did question the geologist about what a golf course is. A tree comes down, people walk into the bush, there can be whatever in there, a Mississauga rattler or whatever. I've seen them at Essex, I've seen them at Mr. Mayo's golf course and a few others, including Ambassador. There's nothing you can do. It's a natural area, and if it impedes his business, which in one hand we say he can continue, but in the other hand, we're handcuffing him. So I would like that maybe addressed in some form, or is it as simple as I see it and Mr. Mayo sees? Mayo.
Thank you for the question. Absolutely, we heard Mr. Mayo and you at the last meeting, and we provided an appropriate response to most of the elements of natural heritage on his property with a special provision. The issue that remains is one element, which is an existing drain. And we've heard some other commentary about existing drains and their identification in the environmental protection designation. And that's what they are, based on the advice of LGL. They do accommodate, in many cases, fisheries, which have special protection. However, in the environmental protection designation, there is a specific policy that deals with existing drains, and it gives very broad latitude on how to deal with those drains. What it doesn't do is say the words, existing uses can continue. Happy to add that. I think that's all it requires. The key is that if we start changing existing drains on one property, then we would need to change them on all the properties. And they're too important to simply let them all go under the overlay, for example. So I think we can ameliorate the concern with a sentence. And we can do that in between adoption and delivery to the county. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Capata?
I've been taking notes, Your Worship, and if you bear with me, I've got a few. I'm going to draw to some specific questions. Some came from other members in the community. And I'm going to just go back to page 13 of the document. And I'm going to call it document 1 and document 2 because in my PDF there's two documents. So page 13 in document 2, section J, speaks about tree cutting. So I'll give you a chance to find it. I just want some clarification on what that means.
That means cutting trees down.
So, but it also speaks about, and I'm going to just pull it up, are you allowed to cut trees down? And if you are not, what happens?
Well, it's in the environmental protection designation. So within the environmental protection designation, you're not allowed to cut down trees and then say, they're gone, remove the designation. That's having an undue impact on the natural heritage system, and that would be in contravention of provincial policy.
Understood. So if I had a piece of property and I cut down trees, would it be the municipality or the province that would deal with my act that violates and contravenes?
Good question. I know you don't have a tree cutting bylaw, and neither does the county. However, there's no compunction for the town to promote an amendment to remove a property from environmental protection simply by the act of someone cutting down their trees.
Thank you. Section 2.4.6, community mailboxes. It says pedestrian facilities. I've had a question about someone who has a special need. where it says, and I'm just going to pull it up, where it talks about community mailboxes shall be accessible in pedestrian areas and facilities. This person drives themselves and is unable to move with the freedom that some of us have because of their abilities. So I'm just looking to better understand, so I can get back to this resident, about what that means about community mailboxes. And it's on page 21, section 2.4.6.
In terms of the guidelines, they are guidelines. Typically, if Canada Post is developing community mailboxes, they would, under the Ontarians,
AODA.
accessibility for Ontarians with disabilities, they would be required to make sure that their community mailboxes consider accessibility concerns as a responsible government agency.
My next one. Section 2.4.9 and 2.6, talking about bike lanes. I cycle badly, but I do. Bill 212, this municipality, no municipality has been designated yet for not being allowed to have bike lanes. So if we put this package together and for some reason LaSalle becomes a designated community where we can install bike lanes, and I realize I'm asking you to look into the future, what happens?
That's a very interesting question. I believe every municipality will be asking that question, what is your right to develop bike lanes in consideration of provincial policy? I have no idea how that will work, how that will be implemented, if it will stand.
And then one question, another one about the trees. As a good old Alberta boy growing up in Red Deer, Alberta, we had trees that were used to block wind. I looked at the presentation that these folks did, and I saw them as, again, in my youth, as trees to block that we all had around our properties and things of that nature. I just want to better understand the row, and I'm going to use a layman's, I'm going to use my term, rows of trees that have been there forever, that have grown up tall, that are along properties that were farmed, that may have had the simple purpose for designating my land and your land, or to stop the wind from going across the plain.
So when we identified the criteria for the woodlands and significance, we used 20 meters as the minimum width. So technically, the natural heritage system doesn't include a single row of trees. But if those rows of trees are within 20 meters, if you look at the canopy and the drip line of the canopy, then they would have been included because they meet the criterion. So technically, a single row of immature trees wouldn't qualify as part of the natural heritage system. But based on the information that we had and looking at air photos and so on, the areas we've identified met the criteria.
And through your worship, that's because they're a single row of mature trees that have that width? I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, it's either the canopy is meeting the 20-meter width of those trees, or there's two rows of trees within 20 meters of one another, and therefore that also would meet the criterion. So that example that was provided earlier is right on the threshold of whether it would be included or not. Typically, we would err, on the side of protection and including it, because there is an opportunity to remove it if you do the appropriate studies.
Last one, my father used to live close to Mr. Cawthort's property, and so I used to spend a lot of time out there, and I just want to make sure that I understand. The gentleman's spoken about noise designations and encroachment on industrial lands. I just want to make sure that we're not going to, he's spoken at great length about his concern is that person X or person Y builds a house, then they find out they're close to industrial property, and they go after that gentleman. So I just want to make sure that I understand exactly, I think I understand what he presented. I just want to make sure that I have it properly, please.
Yes, you have it properly. The goal for us is to provide that protection on lands that are not already zoned. There are zones within Howard Bouffard that are within 300 meters that are already zoned, but those zonings do not include sensitive land uses or are already encumbered by a hold symbol in order to study compatibility issues. My understanding is that the legal representation has asked for basically a secondary plan that deals just with that, which I don't think is necessary as long as we identify those lands that are to be designated for residential or sensitive land uses that are within 300 meters, provide a hold symbol on those lands, and part of the requirement to lift the hold is the preparation of a compatibility study. I believe one of the requests was to, in addition to the D6 guidelines, to add the NPC 300 guidelines, which is something that we can do as a simple addition to the sentence. However, it's very important to note that yes, they are provincial, but they are guidelines for council to consider when you're making a decision about compatibility. But happy to add NPC 300 to the list.
Your worship, I would be happy if that was possible. Those are my questions, your worship.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burns, go ahead.
I'm glad you talked about hedgerows, Deputy Mayor, because I understand those well. In Essex County, Lambton, Kent, Chatham, London, I see farmers. And they just destroy them along creeks or whatever. They can pile that stuff along the 401, 45 feet in the air, let it sit there for 4 years and burn the hell out of it. We just had it out in my area of Golfview where farmer went in and he took it all out. So there's nothing stopping anyone as we speak today to do the same thing in the areas that you're looking at, in my opinion. And we as a municipality have to protect all of that, and yet a farmer can do whatever the heck he or she wants. And it's really irked me that there's no provincial standards that protect those areas where they're much more important than in these areas here. And I know where Mr. Clinbile's property is, and I've walked some of that, and I've seen the farming there. And he's right, what's there is there, but he will have to do, I believe, and I would like clarification, he'll have to do, if they want to develop that area or anybody else in that area, in these natural areas, they have to do the one thing that hasn't been done, and up to now the developers have not been willing to do, is the environmental study. Is that correct? And then these areas are either in or out depending on a final in-depth review, which means walking the land, going through the seasons to make sure what's there and what's not there. Is that a fact, or am I misreading the report? Thank you.
Through Mayor Malush, I'm just trying to think how best to word this. Yes, you are correct that study is required. In many cases, that study can be scoped. We refer to it as a scoped environmental impact assessment. And that is a much less intense level of study that would be required in order to demonstrate that the feature is or is not within the natural heritage system. So it doesn't mean you have to necessarily do multi-season investigations in order to confirm that. You may be able to do it much more quickly and simpler, and the opportunity is there to do that type of an assessment, which is much less onerous on the prospective developer. It also, the other thing I should mention, and I didn't mention it in my earlier answer, and that is it depends on whether the feature is currently within the environmental protection designation or whether it's within the assessment overlay. Okay, you can do the study regardless, but in answering that question about the 20 meters and so on, I'd have to have the specifics in order to be more precise. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Most of my questions have been answered, but I did have points from each of the delegations I just wanted to touch on. We already covered number 1. Item 3, we discussed, it was the official plan for the county and restoration opportunities, and that it contradicts the OP at the county. Can you comment on that?
So as I mentioned early on in my presentation, we've done extensive consultation with the County of Essex Planning Department on both the development and delineation of the actual system, as well as the policies that we're proposing as part of the secondary plan. And I can say with certainty that our current plan that we have before you this evening is in conformity and consistent with the County of Essex official plan. There is a conformity exercise with respect to the land use, the environmental protection designation that needs to be undertaken with the county OP document. And that exercise has been completed to the satisfaction of the county as well. The restoration opportunities layer is just that. They are opportunities for restoration, and they are for consideration only. They are not part of a conformity exercise that needs to take place for consistency. They are opportunities identified for consideration.
Thank you. There were 2 presentations who spoke about lots on Pamela. And so each of them were concerned with the new, I guess they're now natural heritage. They're no longer, I think they were overlays before, is that correct? Or they were deferred urban before? Do you know for sure? No? So my question is, either way, the cost involved to have biology done on those lands to prove whether they are or aren't going to be considered that designation, is that any different than any other property located in the Howard Bouffard? Because I thought I heard earlier that any developments that come forward are going to require that same biology. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Mayor. All development applications in Howard Bouffard will be required to do an environmental impact study. Regardless of whether they're in the environmental protection designation or the further study restoration overlay or not, all of them have to do it. In addition to that, and this may go to some of the things Mr. Valenti was talking about, every development application is also required to carry out a species at risk assessment. These are studies that are required for any development.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because I know that was the concern brought up, was that there were additional fees that some of these people may have to pay, but it's something that no matter where the development is in the area, it has to have this, is what I'm understanding. Okay. Mr. Valenti also did talk about property lines in clear plan. Is there a way for us to do that where the Howard Bouffard does show property lines so people are clear where they fall with the natural heritage features or anything else? Is that a possibility?
That is not typical of a secondary plan. A secondary plan is intended to be much more loose for interpretive purposes. However, zoning should be snapped to property lines, and property lines should be shown in zoning. That is to come. So you will see the interpretation of official plan boundaries in zoning. But it's very atypical, unless there's a specific reason, to show a property boundary in a secondary plan. I would say the only exception here in Howard Bouffard was on some of the elements of the Laurier Parkway, where we were trying to find depth and access, where we looked specifically at property boundaries on the north side. That's the only place where we really focused our attention on property boundaries, because it's not supposed to be based on property boundaries, and absolutely natural heritage features don't care.
I appreciate that. I did have 2 other questions because they were already answered earlier. So the changes that have been discussed regarding Seven Lakes, as well as the land use study and the change of wording for the MPC 300 guidelines. we're saying those changes can be made before this goes to the OP number 2 to the county, like those, because they're minor enough, it doesn't need to come to council again? No.
Provided council concurs, those are really editorial changes that we're happy to make, and we can make those prior to sending the documentation off to the county.
Okay, thank you. I think all of my questions have been answered. It's really not, this hasn't been an easy process. It's been a couple years that we've been doing this. But Mr. Mio actually was bang on with his comments. We have a housing shortage and a lack of supply, and yes, we can delay this. Council has that option this evening to defer it. But at the same time, I think administration, as well as our partners here who have joined us today, have done a very good job at addressing as many of the concerns as possible that we can, realizing there's different interests sitting in this room. Half the presentations want the removal of the natural heritage, and the other half want more natural heritage. And we're never going to please everyone. And this is not an easy thing. And, you know, we obviously our thoughts are with people who are concerned about losing value of their land, but it's been said here that, you know, this isn't final. There are steps that you can take as well. And I think that's really important that we're making that clear when this moves forward, or if it moves forward. We also had 4 written submissions that I know council had the chance to review. And I even know council, who's not with us tonight, has had a chance to at least review it and had thoughts, and were able to ask questions of administration that could have been added to tonight's presentation as well. So I'm comfortable moving forward and having that vote this evening, because I think we've been able to address as much as we can. I don't have any other questions. I really want to see development happen here in the future. And by future, I don't mean 15 or 20 years from now. You heard from Mr. Valente. He's been sitting on his land for 20 or 30 years or whatever it's been. And I know there's many developers in that area. And we want the development, but we think it's even more important to protect our natural areas. That's what we love about the town of LaSalle, and we know that as well. And that's why, you know, seeing the increase in the natural heritage features is very important to us. And so I realize when we increase that, we are going to affect some landowners by doing that. It is important that we focus on that as well, and that we follow the provincial policy statement. So those are my comments for today. Council, if there's anything else you'd like to add, Deputy Mayor Capata?
I just want to make sure while we do this, that the amendments that we discussed, can you just tell me what's going to be added? I was taking notes. I just want to make sure that by the time it goes to the county, we know that the amendments have been added. So it's going to be,
So I have them written down, if you want to add to them, it was the 7 lakes, making sure that the current use.
Yep.
And then for the industrial property, that we were going to make sure that the wording for the land use study was in there, as well as the MPC 300 guidelines.
Yeah, the addition of NPC 300 guidelines in that special policy.
thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor Burns.
I'm prepared to make a motion to move forward, and I'll speak to it afterwards,
Okay.
as
So
per recommendation.
moved by Councillor Burns, support by Deputy Mayor Capata. Go ahead, Councillor Burns.
Okay, I've been on this council since 1991. We have dealt with this issue probably at the earliest in maybe 95, 97. Yes, Mr. Mio, your golf course wasn't there. It was just a 9-hole, and you built out there, and you built a beautiful development. We've seen the changes. The old part of LaSalle is 1, 2 little subdivisions left, and it's built out in almost its entirety. So the only area of growth for us is this area. And what's most important is, I believe it's Ellis will become a north-south artillery road at some point in time, which will take a tremendous amount of traffic from Malden Road. We have nothing. And it would be very similar to what we did with Michigan Avenue on Highway 18, when you actually had to go down 1.5 miles on Gary and International to go all the way to Front Road, to eventually come up to Laurier, and then out and jig-jag through to get to the 401. So the longer we wait, it's not maybe going to be perfect in everybody's eyes. Nothing will happen, so it's time to move forward, and this is probably in one of the most dramatic things we're going to do with the town of LaSalle since I moved here in the early 70s. So saying that, I am very comfortable moving forward. Everyone will have an opportunity to, as I've heard, and I think people here have heard, to be able to address the environmental parts of their property and see what can be developed and what can't be developed, and we go from there. And we have to have a balance because we only have so much water capacity, and this balance is there looking at water capacity for all landowners, not just one. And I certainly don't want to get in a position with not having enough water to build the houses we want to build. And we didn't talk much about that, but there are municipalities being sued because they've handed out development permits and they have no water. And we certainly don't want to get in that position. So I think well done. And we'll move forward from here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So I have a mover and I have support, and I will call the question. All in favor of the recommendation? And that carries. Thank you for joining us for this part of the discussion. We'll move on in the agenda
Thank
to
you.
item, thank you for joining
Very
us.
much.
Thank you for coming down. Item 2 is our Matchett and Sprucewood contract award, and I will just wait just a couple moments for the movement to settle, and then we can continue. Yes, okay. Did he know that? That he has to be quick? Okay. That's fine. Has to be quick. I can't continue without him. I have to wait for Deputy Mayor Capado to return so that we have quorum. Okay, so our Matchett Sprucewood contract award, our Manager of Engineering, Mr. Capucci.
Thank you, Mayor and members of council. Happy to see there's one person still here for this one. Thank you, appreciate that. This report here is to award the Matchett intersection improvements. Since I've written and published this report, the tender has closed, and I'd like to adjust the recommendation and add the results as well of the tender to make part of my presentation tonight. So the revised recommendation should read that the report of the Manager of Engineering dated February 4th, 2025 regarding Matchett and Sprucewood contract award be received, and that council authorizes administration to award the road widening and signalization at Matchett Road intersections contract to Paracon Enterprises, Inc. for a bid price of $1,530,931.50, excluding HST, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute said contract with Paracon Enterprise, Inc. And while I'm at it, I'd also like to read the tender prices. Just to give you a little history, the tender went out and opened in February, or at the last January 31st. And so since then, we've closed and have the tender results. And PureCon, as I said, was the lowest. The next was GIP Paving Inc. at $1,814,400. Nevin Construction Inc. was $1,839,777. Amico Infrastructures Inc. was $1,897,800. Sterling Ridge Infrastructure Inc. was $2,040,483. And PowerServe Inc. was $2,388,000 even. So thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. The reason why my report didn't have that information originally is because we have a really aggressive schedule this construction season, and we want to make sure we're on this council agenda so that we could sign a contract with a low bidder, and we can begin construction as soon as possible. With my conversations with the contractor, they're looking to start within the next 3 weeks. We'd like to start signing the contract so they can purchase signal infrastructure as well as getting their other materials ready for the job. This project, like I said, will start within 3 weeks. It will be happening at the same time as the Matchett Road and Bridge reconstruction project. So when Matchett Road closes, we will be constructing this work like we've discussed in the past. When we look at the tender results, PureCon is the lowest, and we've worked with PureCon before. I've worked with them before. We're confident that they'll be able to complete this type of work. We've talked to the contractor, and they've also said that they're going to be able to meet our tight deadlines because we're planning on opening this intersection before we start the Front Road DMAF projects, which is going to be a large project for the town, so we'll need this intersection improved and ready to handle the influx of traffic. So based on all that, the project did come in just a little bit over budget. I think it was about $70,000 over the estimated budget within the approved 2025 capital budget, but due to the competitive price and the good price that we got from PureCon, we're recommending its signing of the contract. What's worth noting is we are under on the engineering side of the project, so there is also significant savings from the engineering side to cover those losses that were over on the estimated budget. So we recommend we move forward with the project, and I can answer any questions anyone may have.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions? I have two. Actually, you answered one of them. Are we expecting any closures of the intersection while this work's being done?
Yes, there will be minor closures of this intersection during the day, I would say, while they're working, but at nights they'll be able to open it back up. The closures, like I said, Matchett will already be closed south of this intersection, so a lot of that traffic will already have been diverted, and we're going to do our best to keep Sprucewood moving. We'll be looking at flaggers and trying to minimize that, but there could be times where we may need to do full closures, but I don't expect the traffic patterns to, like I said, since there's already going to be a road closure on that, traffic patterns won't be the same as we're used to today. But there will have to be some minor closures for the paving and for some of the reconstruction work, yeah. We're talking like 3 days at most, yeah.
And so my final question is, obviously, we've had conversations with the City of Windsor, and do we have to notify them of any of these closures as we go?
We've notified them that the contract is closed. We're going to be updating them periodically as the contract goes forward. We will be needing to install these signs on their property, so we'll continue through their processes as required, but they're fully aware of the work that's happening. Yep.
Thank you very much. Members of council, so there's the revised recommendation, and Mr. Capucci already read it, but I can read it to you again if you need me to. Deputy Mayor?
Prepared to move, Madam Mayor.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Capata, support by Councilor Burns. All in favor? And that carries.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 3, Enbridge Gas Model Franchise Agreement Renewal Process, and that's going to Legal Counsel, Mr. Jadot.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. The report before you tonight is with respect to the model franchise agreement that we have with Enbridge Gas. The current agreement is expired. It was initially with Union Gas, but Union Gas and Enbridge merged about 6 years ago, so this is to ensure that we have the continued gas supply coming in, and the term of this agreement is for the next 20 years. I have to acknowledge that Erin O'Donnell, our paralegal, prepared this report, and she was the main point of contact with Enbridge throughout this process. We had requested a handful of changes through our engineering department, who identified a few items that we would have liked to shift. However, each of those were rejected. As we learned, the Ontario Energy Board, the OEB, are the ones who actually approved the form of this agreement, and they don't allow for ad hoc changes in their model franchise agreements unless there's some very unique exceptions, which these didn't qualify for. Even non-contentious issues, they don't change this agreement for almost anything. So that was kind of the scope that we were operating under here. So the agreement is attached to the bylaw on tonight's agenda, 2025-021. We note that the original publishing of this agenda, there was a slight tweak to the bylaw itself. There's an additional recital in there about waiving the requirement for approval of municipal electors. So the reasoning for this is that the Enbridge is basically governed by the different act, Municipal Franchises Act. It's a different piece of legislation because it operates within our right-of-ways. It requires our formal agreements to ensure that the regulated and coordinated gas distribution is delivered in that manner. So there's a couple of things that we learned after we published the agenda in terms of what we needed to put in there for language, so that way when they bring this to the Ontario Energy Board, it gets approval and we can move forward. So that is the high level that we had to kind of walk through there. And if it's not included, the consequence of that is that the public would have to actually vote on continuing to do this agreement with Enbridge, which I don't think is the best use of both staff and municipal time. So we're suggesting that we go forward with this list waiver, and which this is common practice at municipalities around not just the area, but Ontario in general. So as such, I'm going to also request that we add a similar provision to the resolution. So I have the two recommendations in my report, the one about receiving the report, the second one about approving the bylaw that appears later on. And then I'll just read off an additional resolution that I would like to have added in there. So in addition to the two that I mentioned, I'd also like to say that council requests that the Ontario Energy Board make an order declaring and directing that the assent of the municipal electors to the draft bylaw and franchise agreement pertaining to the corporation of the town of LaSalle is not necessary pursuant to the provisions of section 9(4) of the Municipal Franchises Act. So that I just want to put that on the record and read that out. If any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions? If not, there is a revised recommendation that was just summarized. Any moved by Councilor Richo-Spagnuolo, support? Councilor Burns, all in favor? That carries. Item I1, our consent agenda. The summary reports are there below. Any questions or comments? Nope. Recommendations that the summary reports on the consent agenda for February 25th, 2025 be received. Moved by Deputy Mayor Capata, support by Councilor Richo-Spagnuolo. All in favor? And that carries. There are no committee matters. Any questions or statements by council members? There being none, our notices of motion, we have two. The first one is the Play for a Cure 2025. And Councilor Richo-Spagnuolo, is there anything you want to add to it? No? Just move 1 second. So in there, we just need clarification of the payment amount that you were putting forward.
Thank you through you. So the payment amount would be anywhere up to $2,500, which would be the most allocation that we can, as council, agree on. That would be the amount that would be requested, was $2,500. Thank you.
Okay.
Motion to support.
Okay, so moved by Councilor Regis-Spagnolo, support by Councilor Burns, all in favor, and that carries. Now to Deputy Mayor Capata. Anything you want to add?
Quickly, just a couple of things. Today, while we were here, the province of Nova Scotia has already enacted a piece of legislation to remove all interprovincial barriers and to allow free trade within the country in anticipation of the U.S. tariffs taking place on the 4th of March, and then on the 12th, which is steel, aluminum, pharmaceuticals, and cars. I think we are responsible in requesting that we are able to buy anything that we need in our own country and not pay a differential value as we go forward as a municipality. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Agreed 100%. Moved by Deputy Mayor Capata, support by Councilor Regis-Spagnolo. Any comments? All in favor? And that carries. There are no closed sessions to report. We do have bylaws this evening. Bylaw 2025021 was corrected since the agenda was really published, and the corrected versions are now included as part of the agenda. So we're going to get the following bylaw a first and second reading, which is 2025021, a bylaw to authorize a franchise agreement between the Corporation of the Town of LaSalle and Enbridge Gas Incorporated. And then, do we want to do it separate? Okay, so we'll do that one first since it's the first and second. Moved by Councilor Regis-Spagnolo, support by Councilor Burns. All in favor? That carries. And then the following bylaws are going to be given a first, second, third reading and finally passed, and that's the 2025-020 bylaw to amend the official plan OPA amendment to number 2, 2025022, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2025007, being a bylaw to establish user fees or charges for services, activities, or the use of property, and 2025023, a bylaw to authorize civil marriage solemnization services in the town of LaSalle by the clerk or delegates of the clerk. Moved by Councilor Burns, support by Councilor Regis-Spagnolo. All in favor? And that carries. Our confirmatory bylaw 2025024 be given a first, second, and third reading and finally passed. Moved by Deputy Mayor Capata, support by Councilor Regis-Spagnolo. All in favor? And that carries. There's a list of meetings below. Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening. I know it was a long one for us here in LaSalle. Thank you for people who stayed and for people who joined us online. Have a good night.